Hello and good morning, everybody. My name is Katharina Gurel. I'm the co-chair of this session, and I would only like to check. We have to wait for Trinus Kumbo, for Professor Kumbo. He's still not present. He's the chair, but I would like to check if my presenters are here. I already see Mr. Akurun. Hello. Hi, good to see you.
Hello, good morning.
How are you? Good to see you.
I'm all right.
Yeah. So the first presenter is already here. Is another presenter already present? If so, please give me a sign that you're here. Silence. Okay, so let's wait a couple of more minutes and I hope you are not too impatient. Waiting a couple of more minutes for your presentation.
Not at all. I'm good.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, Dr. Oluwayemi. Hi, good to see you. You're my presenter number 2, aren't you? You're still muted. There you are.
Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning. Good to see you. How do you do?
Thank you, I'm fine.
Good to see you. So you're also ready to go. Let's wait maybe 1 or 2 minutes more. If Professor Gumbo is not coming in, I will take over and we'll start the session so we somehow stay on time. Is there another? I'm still looking for two more presenters. Are they here? Okay. Oh, I see Professor Gumbo is here. Professor Gumbo?
Hello, yes, I've just joined. Katharina,
Fantastic.
are you good?
I'm good. Hello, good to see you.
Let me put the video. Can you see me now?
Perfectly well. Hello, good morning.
Morning, morning, how are you?
How are you? Greetings to Johannesburg.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. How is Salzburg?
I'm in Vienna at the moment. Vienna, everything is
Oh,
fine.
you're in Vienna.
Yeah, it's good. It's quite good. I have already checked 2 of our presenters. The first 2 are already here, so I think we're good to go. And I would hand over to you. I hope that the rest of the presenters is dropping in during the session.
All right, all right. Thank you. Just to confirm, who are the presenters that we have?
There is Dr. Akurun. Hello. Where is he? On the top. And then I also see Dr. Oluwayemi Onia. Now
Yes.
I have to really focus.
Yes. No, you're doing very well. You're doing very well. All right. Thank you. Thanks the two. Okay, there's Doctor and Mr. Isn't. Thank you for joining. We're going to be
Thank you.
co-chairing. Yes, Olawal Akogun.
Olawale.
Olawel. Olawel. Are you well? Olawel.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So how to pronounce the last name? Akogun.
It is called Olawale Akogun.
Okay, Olawale. All right, thanks very much. And Dr. Onia, that one, I know it very well. I know how to pronounce it.
Good morning, Prof. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. Are you well?
Yes, I'm very fine.
And how's the baby?
Well, it's fine. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. So let me check with my co-chair, Katarina. Do we give the others 2 minutes to join? Because I think we have 4 presentations.
I think there are 4 presentations, and Anati is just checking with the other 2 ones where they are. I think it's okay to start because we have about 20 minutes per presentation, so I think there is plenty of time for the rest to join in.
Plenty of time, you can say that again.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Katarina. Like I told you, are always on fire. And so good people, you know, myself and Katarina, we come a very long way. We are partners in a project. We've been to Austria. She has been to Joburg. We work together well. And for your own information, Katarina, Dr. Onia is my postdoc student. So we work together. She's also based here in Joburg. So, but I checked, I think the other presenters are also based in South Africa. But Mr. Akoguni, are you in Nigeria? Just to check with
Yes, I'm presently in
wonderful.
Ibadan, Nigeria.
All the way from, is it Lagos?
No, Ibadan.
Oh, Ibadan. Okay, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
No. Really, we are impressed to have you here. And this shows that the symposium is indeed inclusive. We really need the whole of Africa and beyond to be part of this symposium. And already you can hear Katarina, the co-chair, speaking all the way from Vienna, Austria. So this is a good session. So I'm not going to waste time. I'm going just briefly to introduce myself. My name is Trinos Gumbo. I'm an associate professor and also a head of urban and regional planning at the University of Johannesburg. So I've been actually for some time now, getting tired. I want to step down and focus on my academic projects, but all is well. And I specialize mostly in transportation research, public spaces. We are doing with Katarina and Stefan and my colleague in the university, Prof. Musakwa Walter. I also focus on housing. And normally I would say I broadly focus on sustainability issues, where I look at mostly the social aspect and also the environmental, that is mostly spatial planning or physical planning, and especially when it comes to housing, transportation, and all that, and also intelligent transport systems. So that's me. I've been with UJ for some time now, since 2014. I think, yeah, I'm getting to around, is that 7 years or so? Yeah, 7 years in July. I'll be having 7 years in the University of Johannesburg. So I will ask my co-chair also to briefly introduce yourself. I don't know if there's any other thing that you need to know about me, but that's me, HOD of Urban Regional Planning, Associate Professor. Then I like urban planning issues from a different, in a way, I would say, perspective in terms of how do we try and develop intelligent transport systems, and even, I would say, integrated housing systems. Everything's all about integration, all about intelligent systems and all that. So I would want to apply some technological aspects in the whole thing. And yeah, I think that does it. I don't know, Katarina, maybe you can say something briefly about yourself, then we get started. And I don't know, given that we were dismissed from the plenary a bit late, if the presenters will be fine if we give them 15 minutes to talk, then 5 minutes we'll discuss later. I don't know, we can say 15, take the questions, and then discussions will come later.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Professor Gumbo. My name is Katharina Gugerell. I'm based in Vienna. I'm a tenure-track professor for sustainable land use, and I'm mainly working on land use planning and urban planning, also in the context of mobility planning. That's why I'm also here chairing the session on integrated transport. I'm looking forward to go to South Africa again and also to work with a new PhD student that I'm co-supervising on urban land reform and the redistribution of space to the urban poor. So this is also very much in the focus of this fantastic and really important conference. And I'm very much looking forward to the presentations now. And I would hand over back to you, Trinus. And let's start with the first presentation.
Thank you very much. Akoguni, let's give you 15 minutes. Let's see if you can manage. Then after that, then we'll go on. If we have questions, we need also to maybe welcome all the attendees who are with us here, all those who are attending this session. You are very much welcome. Please, if you have questions, just write on the chat section. Then we'll check all the issues that will be raised. Then we'll discuss them and do in a way together with the presenters. Thank you very much. Mr. Kogun, you can get started. We'll give you 15 minutes to talk to us.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Oh, yes, it's very clear.
Okay, my name is Olawale, and I'm a PhD student from the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, University of Ibadan. Before I start, I would like to give a shout out to my supervisor, Professor Ipingbemi. He's in class right now and he can't make it here. So what I'm doing here today is basically presenting one of my objectives for my PhD studies. And I'll try as much as possible to relate it to inclusivity as we have it in urban transit system. So which is why I've titled my presentation, Will Inclusivity Matter When Everyone is Dead? Risky urban taxi driver behavior. Now to my content, I have four things I'm going to talk about. The first, the pathway to an inclusive transport for all. Now, how we went about the study, what we discovered, and the conclusion, and what we think should be done. Now, moving to the next slide. The pathway to an inclusive transport for all. Now, I would like to tell a story of some sort. Now, if you can see the little mock-up I made on my screen. Now, it's like a journey to inclusive. The little vehicle there is like, okay, inclusive transport, inclusive and safe transport. Now, first off is transport and mobility. We all know that transport and mobility are important to our cities, and they can contribute to reducing poverty and support equitable and inclusive social development. Now, the availability of a safe and reliable transport infrastructure and services that provides a flexible, reliable, and affordable service is important for economic growth and is indispensable for a balanced distribution of economic and social benefits. Now, the support for informal transit. We all know that supporting formal transit is essential, but also, again, it is insufficient. This is because in many cities located around the global south, formal transit serve a minority of urban residents, and the informal transport dominates urban transits. And this includes the use of okadas, which are local motorcycles in Nigeria, the keke napep, the matatus, the danfo, and the traditional taxis. Now, moving on to the UN Resolution 74-299. Now, they adopted this resolution, which is simply to improve global road safety with the target of preventing at least 50% of road traffic deaths and injuries by the year 2030. Now, between the support for informal transit and the urban and the UN resolution, we have a very big problem. And this problem will hinder us on the pathway to achieving a safe and inclusive urban transport system. And this is what I'm dwelling on today. And what is this problem? It's simply road traffic crash. Now, what is road traffic crash? It's simply the collision of a car with other road users, other vehicles, animals, or a road infrastructure. Now, I'm going to bore you with some facts and statistics. Approximately 1.3 million people die each year from road traffic crash. The road traffic crash is the leading cause of death for young people between the ages of 5 and 29. And this age bracket, it's expected that it's going to increase by the year 2030. Now, more than half of all mortality caused by road traffic crash have to do with vulnerable road users, the cyclists, the pedestrians, the motorcyclists, and their passengers. 93% of the world fatalities on the road occur on low and medium income countries. Also, sub-Saharan Africa is the global capital for road traffic deaths across the globe. Now, there has been no progress, and that's the most scary part. There has been no progress in reducing the number of deaths arising from road traffic crash in any low-income country across the globe. Now, my studies based on taxi driver, and the justification for that is that taxi driving is one of the most hazardous occupation because of the risk involved to the driver themselves and to the other road users and their passengers. Now, moving forward, I would like to talk about the components of the road traffic system. Now, there are three components: the road user, and the vehicle. RTC, road traffic crash, RTC for short, may arise from any of these components. However, making the road traffic system less hazardous requires a system approach. That is, we need to look at the entire system as a whole rather than looking at them individually. Well, my PhD looked at the whole system as a whole, but because I'm focusing on the road user today, I'll be speaking just on the road user, the taxi driver. Now, in the main study, we looked at the entire system, like I said earlier. However, for this presentation, I'll be concentrating more on the road user, the taxi driver. This is because driver-related behavioral factors dominate the cause of road traffic crash, given that 3 out of 5 crashes is related to the driver. Based on the foregoing, we sought to explore the risky taxi driver behavior in my city, Ibadan. Now, how we went about the study. We utilized the Reason et al. 1990 driver behavior scale, which is a psychometric tool that measures risky driver behavior. Now, we sent out 811 copies of questionnaire. We got back 723, and after cleaning and sorting, we were able to use just 655, which equals about 81% response rate. We utilized the exploratory factor analysis, and we used the Mann-Whitney-U test to test for difference between crash involvement amongst drivers in the past 12 months. We discovered 5 risky taxi drivers, and that's after the extraction and the rotation in the exploratory factor analysis. And we got 5 risky driver behaviors, which accounted for 53.66% of variance in the data. And we named them aggressive violation, dangerous violation, major lapses, minor lapses, and driver error. Now, this is the factor loadings we for each of the risky behavior we extracted, and we were able to come up with this 5. We kind of muted the noise by selecting just factor loadings that are greater than 0.4. This is the factor loadings, and these are the components of the risky driver behavior. In the aggressive violation, we have people exceeding speed limits, taxi driver nearly eating the road users while turning, and a whole lot of them, as you can see on the picture here. Now, we went a step further, and we're like, okay, let's see how this risky taxi driver behavior varies between crash involvement, that is, drivers saying they were involved in crash in the past 12 months, and those who were not involved in crash in the past 12 months. So we utilized the Mann-Whitney U test, and we noticed that out of all the five risky behavior we got, only dangerous violation differs between drivers who were involved in crash, while other risky behavior were not significant. Now, we could say that under estimating speed when overtaking, driving close to a car to signal the driver to hasten up, crossing junction knowing that the traffic has stopped or that the traffic order has stopped the traffic, and forcing the way into an incoming traffic, most times are responsible for road crash involvement between taxi drivers. Now, this didn't satisfy us enough, and we went a bit further to see what really happened from the administrative point of view. So we went to the union, the National Union for Road Traffic Wardens, which is the umbrella body responsible for, which is the trade union responsible for all commercial road drivers. And we interviewed the head of admin, and the result was shocking. And he told us of an example of a taxi driver after closing. He picked up a girl, which he said was likely a prostitute, and they were engaging in oral sex while driving. And we're like, wow. So behaviors like these with driver excesses. And from literature, we were able to determine that the behavior that is sexual driving is similar to drunk driving, but much worse, as during sex, the lateral orbitofrontal cortex becomes less active. And this is the portion of the human brain that is responsible for reasoning, decision-making, and value judgment. Thus, we could say that the driver lost his decision-making ability, hence the crash. Now, I would like to relate all what I've said to inclusivity. And the United Nations Economic and Social Council for Asia and Pacific identified 5 critical conditions to meet so as to achieve a safe and inclusive urban transport system. Now, 2 out of these 5 relate to road safety. Thus, there is no way we can achieve a safe and inclusive transport system if the economic burden of road traffic crash is increasing. For example, the WHO states that road traffic crash cost countries around the world about 3% of their GDPs. Not only this, we have families dropping below the poverty line because their breadwinner died or became an amputee and couldn't walk.
Sorry to disturb. Can you wrap up in the next 3 minutes?
Come again?
Can you wrap up in the next 3 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, thank you.
I'm rounding up. Now, furthermore, commercial drivers need to consider their health we find out that they engage in risky behaviors such as overspeeding and disobeying lots of traffic laws just because they want to increase their daily returns. Now, before concluding, I would like to throw an open question. Now, given the situation of things, would inclusivity really matter if the status quo is maintained? If we don't address risky driving amongst drivers, or the driver loss of their value judgments, all because of increased returns? Now, I'll leave everybody to think about this. If we can truly achieve inclusivity and before tackling road safety. Now, we found that dangerous violations is critical in this whole issue. And this implies that dangerous violation is the most popular amongst taxi drivers who crashed. And this needs proper attention if we want a safe and inclusive urban transport system. Now, what we think should be done, aside from the 3 E's, which is the engineering, education, and enforcement, that is generally adopted to resolve road traffic crash, we recommended the creation of a professional body to oversee taxi drivers. Now, this professional body will be backed by law, and to become a taxi driver, you have to become a member of this body. Now, what we have normally is that anybody can become a driver, a taxi driver. All you have to do is just paint your vehicle and go on the road and pay for the daily tickets. We think this is required as the trade union, which is the NURTW, lacks the institutional capacity to sanction its members. So basically, that's my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, can we indicate if there are issues, questions, or comments on the chat section here? Would want to continue with the presentations, then have discussions later. Can we have the next presenter briefly introduce yourself? Then we'll give you 15 minutes to make your presentation. That's Dr. Onia. The floor is yours, Doc. Start by introducing yourself briefly, then go on to your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Inclusive City Symposium. My name is Oluwayemi Aderibibi, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Today, I'll be presenting a topic sorry, I want to come over my screen.
As she's maneuvering, can we be writing some questions there, comments, so that we don't lose Mr. Agoguni's presentation? Then you will respond after all these presentations. Let's write questions, comments when they're still fresh. We don't want you to lose the momentum. Are you ready, Dr. Onia?
Yes, I'm trying to bring up my screen.
Technology.
Yes.
No, that's fine.
Okay, it's coming up, please. Today, I'll be talking on the adoption of an integrated transport system for sustainable transport planning and development. That's our topic I'm be presenting on.
Can you click your PowerPoint presentation? Let's see it. Click
Yes.
and open.
Loading.
Oh, it's loading. Okay.
Yes. Can you see my slides?
Not yet. I think it's a very huge presentation. I see that you have many kilobytes, so it will actually take some time until it's loaded.
Well,
and it's really coming.
Loaded. Can you see it now?
No.
Not yet.
Hold on.
And screen sharing. Is it loaded now? Because I can see it here.
Anati, by
No.
not yet. Can you make sure that that's the one that is selected to show? Anati, by any chance, do you have the presentation for all the presenters in case they can't load? Then you can upload it. Anati?
No, I don't have them. I don't have them, but I'll put my email address on the chat, then they can email them to me.
Loaded from here.
That would be better. Where presenters struggle to upload, then you can do it from your side.
Panos, shall we
Hello.
switch?
Katarina?
Yes. Hello?
All right, that's fine. That's fine. Can you, I think we can switch, Dr. Lucan can present. Can you preside over that, Katarina? I'll ask
Yeah,
you
that's
to
fine.
preside. Wonderful.
Exactly. Then we will just switch the two presenters so we can manage with the presentation that is not loading yet. And maybe Dr. O'Neill, you can stop your screen sharing mode. That would be helpful. Because then we would hand over to the third presenter who is here. We will take him as a second one. Dr. Yashin Lukan. Hello, are you here?
I am here. You caught me a bit off guard, so give me a few seconds to just.
Yeah, wonderful. Then I will
Thanks.
take the minute and introduce you.
Yes, please.
Dr. Lukan is an architect, an academic and researcher based in South Africa, and he has an interdisciplinary practice, and he's researching alternative methodologies. Are you there?
I am here.
Fantastic.
Really?
Somebody putting someone on hold. He's looking at alternative methodologies of thinking on practice for socioeconomic redressing and spatial transformations in the global south. And I see the presentation is coming up. Looking good. Maybe you can go on presentation mode. Switch on presentation mode on the bottom.
Sorry, I'm going to do that now. Yes.
Fantastic. And then I would hand over, and I'm looking forward to your presentation about inclusive public transport.
Sorry, I realized I must show my face for a little while. So that's me.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Katrina. Thanks, Professor Gumbo. Good to see you. I will switch my camera off now. And then I'll go to presentation mode. Can you see that?
I can see your notes too. So I think you're on two screens. I see the next slide. Maybe it's better to take the normal presentation part because I can see your presenter mode.
So you're not, are you seeing my, oh, I can also see it. I see you seeing the next slide.
Exactly.
As well. Strangely, strange. Okay, so let me go back to this. Is that fine?
Yeah, you can make it a little bit bigger, but I think it's fine. I think it's better to do it like this than to see the presenter mode. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this is less distracting.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much. One of the things I was trying to do is get this into 15 minutes. Prof. Gumbo really cut it fine. Now, if you look at the bottom 45 slides, I'm going to speak really fast. Now, I'll focus on what's most important. So let's get on with it. So I broke this down into parts, a kind of a research methodology. So what's the problem? And the problem that we're facing with the urban transport is that it is, the previous speaker spoke about a vehicle-dominated city and the risks associated with that. Then there are also attitudes to public transport. And we're looking there at issues of mobility versus accessibility, interchanges versus overlaps. And what's neglected, I argue most from an architectural perspective at human scale, is the human city, the experience of humans in the city. What's wellness and well-being, and how has the public transport system actually affected dwelling in the city? And this relates also to exclusive ways of thinking and practice, which happen within disciplinary silos. And we kind of all experience this in our practice and in academia as well as professional practice. So when we look at the motor vehicle dominated city, a lot of it is about considerations of how many people can move. And one of the issues in our city, like the previous speaker mentioned, was we have an influx of motorized vehicles, and some of them are the only affordable ways, like minibus taxis. But these motor vehicles create these moving edges, cutting off the street as a public space. And that's very, very important to consider. So if we look right back at the first industrial revolution and how we moved from a subjective experience of place in traditional cities to objectivist rational planning approaches in disciplinary silos, that's one of my main critiques. So there's a lot of focus on connectivity for the movement of goods and services, but it tends to exclude the multi-layered human experience of movement through space beyond access to tangible goods and amenities. So that's the main argument of this paper. So if you look at the OECD's definition about accessibility, it is about maximizing access to opportunities such as workplaces, services, entertainment, education, goods, and culture. Very importantly, culture. Again, when we look at the neglected human city experience, I'm referring here to the psychological and spiritual experience of being in place. The reality is that humans are alienated at various scales in favor of the motor vehicle. So access is about how are human beings accessing the goods and services in the city through movement of different sort. And sometimes, well, in our case, it leads to placelessness. So another benefit of looking at this aspect of psycho-spiritual access and how the transport system can interface with this is it has the potential to break the shackles of apartheid by, exposing qualities of a city about intercultural relationship and interaction. So infrastructure and built form narratives must not be eroded or inhibited by our approaches to the design of public transport, urban public transport. So we're going to have to think about inclusive urban movement that looks at intangible qualitative experiences of place. And this is going to require interdisciplinary, inter-experiential, participatory approaches in transport design. So I'm not going to go through, I'll just look at the aim. The aim is to expound a critical interdisciplinary inquiry towards alternative thinking for urban inclusivity in the design of public transport systems. Some of the concepts that I refer to, which will come in the paper more than now, is the issues of how social justice informs spatial justice, and how those two concepts can inform complexity. And if we look at complexity in placemaking, and if we look at the works of Christopher Alexander and Balakrishna Doshi, for example, you find that they focus on many layers of experience, and where street is not just a road for vehicles, but street becomes public place. And then we look at the concept of decentralized thinking and practice in the way we approach our approaches to urban public transport systems in the city. So methodology is based on a pragmatist philosophy, a qualitative approach. And much about this is about the experiential quality of place as well as the measurable, right? So I used secondary and primary methods. The primary mainly was visual and graphic analysis or perceptual analysis of contemporary conceptual approaches in the city itself by myself dwelling in various places. So first, I will take you through the historical development of Durban. So the map on the left is the early transport system, and you just see that along the bay, there was a railway line. There's the main road, which is now a highway to the north, and one inland, and one to the south. Those systems evolved over time, and so this was during the colonial period, right, up to the early 1900s. And how the city was at that state, if you looked at it, it had much more of a quality of place about it. Because of the slow kind of mode of transport as well, but the edges to the buildings, things were much more interactive than we have in modern cities. Later, the city around the British town center looked like that. And there were elements, for example, in the Indian market around the Victoria Street area, which transformed a street into a place for market at certain times. So the time factor is important. After that period became the apartheid city planning model. So I did this diagram to show how segregation on racial and socioeconomic lines led to a reorganization of the city, and how the highways and access routes were used as ways to control access to the city. And what that led to in the current, these are drawings, in fact, around that time of, on the left, a white kind of bus transport route in the city, and the others, the diagram on the left shows, the other non-white population access. This you will read about more in the paper itself. So what happened now in the post-apartheid democratic era after 1994? How did the city evolve? And we find that this actually I do as a perceptual analysis. A lot of this are my own photos and my own experience through these places. So if we look at it, we look at how psycho-spiritual accessibility is cut off by the dominance of the motor vehicle. Now, if you look at, I took these images in 2014, the British town centre on the left, the top is the Grey Street precinct, and the bottom the Warwick. And you noticed how motor vehicles are just moving edges that completely disconnect humans and the street as a public place. Moving on, so these are drawings I did to show, although we have potential in these arcades for very vibrant places, what in fact happens is these are cut off. The entire street now, if you look at the photograph on the bottom right, is a separate place. It does not have the quality of an urban place. And the dangers associated with that were explained in the previous presentation. Moving on, the city has undertaken an integrated development plan and more specifically a local area plan to address these issues. And I'm going to skip through this very quickly. From the airport in the north to the development nodes of the south, and the kind of Durban city in the center. So eThekwini wants to be a world-class connected city with accessibility and mobility, right? Within the inner city, the ideas were to maximize efficiency, but one of the key points to this is a walkable city. So these drawings just show how the north, south, east, west inner city connections are working, and how it moves to kind of frontage streets to the diagram on the right, which is the walkable city. And if you look at the walkable city, they talk about pedestrian priority zones and what defines these in that diagram. And you can see 5-minute walk, 400 meters, etc. So it's a step in the right direction. Now, where I move here is I took this picture in Strasbourg, in the north of France on the German border. It's a medieval city. However, you can access, park, and then walk through the city. So it gives a very different approach to what is a town compared to our notion of town here in Durban. Okay, it's just a break slide. If you look at the eThekwini approach via the local area plan, the walkable city, and it consists of really a hybrid of motorized and non-motorized movement. You can see on the right-hand side of this diagram that there's a building with an arcade, a pavement area, and then various kind of motorized and non-motorized. But it's quite a conservative, still quite a conservative approach to how we move. Now, how do we actually move beyond that into critical approaches to movement in place and time to enhance this complexity of human urban experience? And here I refer to Chris Alexander's approach, where he used the mathematics and scientific methodologies together with the humanistic and artistic approaches of perception and dwelling in place to understand how these two, the scientific and the experiential, kind of work together to create complexity in place. I also looked at Balakrishna Doshi's complexity in street design. Although this is Aranya Township, these quotes that he did are so profound. It's about the Indian city is no more than a collection of self-contained villages. And this decentralized approach is really, really important in the way this paper is moving forward. The street must assume a unique identity on human scale with spaces for group activities. So it's not just the segregated street. Now in Durban, back to Durban, there are pockets of urban complexity. However, if you notice here, in the Warwick Junction, it's about raising the pedestrian street above the vehicular road by adaptively reusing abandoned infrastructure. It was a very good initiative by OMM, a design workshop at that stage, and it was exhibited at the Biennale in Venice a few years ago. But you can still see the segregated movement. The railway, obviously on its own on the right-hand side, an abandoned bridge, but the street was designed for vehicles. That's a street that was there all the time, below, the road below, okay? And when we look at the Grey Street precinct, there are also pockets of inclusivity, complexity. If you look at these arcades, as was in the drawing before, a lot of hybrid activity between informal and formal shopping happens. And then there are these arcades that move perpendicular to the streets, which we can learn from, which are completely pedestrianized and have layers, for example, residents on the upper floor, covered walkways and shops below, as the diagram on the left shows. Moving beyond that, these are pics I took on the right-hand side. It's in one of those, the same arcade in the Grey Street area. And on the left, I took this in Shanghai, China, 2013. And you can see similarities in the way layering of place can work and how complexity in pedestrianized areas work. But both these keep the cars out of the pedestrianized areas. And this is something we need to consider more and more. Make parts of the city much more walkable than they are. Then my position is that the city cannot be merely considered a utilitarian process, but the intertextual psycho-spiritual experience of place itself has profound impact on urban vitality and is this human movement to space and time that can develop vitality and placeness in cities. So to end, because I have to do it in 15 minutes, this is my position to take the dialogue forward. And praxis has to be, praxis towards, transformed thinking about urban inclusive transport. We got to look at decentralization and complexity as two key concepts. And from that, we got to consider breaking out. Ultimately, we as professionals and thinkers and communities that engage with this, we need to break out of our disciplinary silos. From academia and practice, we've got to integrate much more multiple intelligences and experience. So a high level of interdisciplinarity comes in. It has to be collaborative and participatory, including the users, the common person in the city itself in the process of design and thinking. So the methods, the methodologies have to include the kind of measurable, but also the perceptual analysis of place, of urban environments in place and time towards transformed thinking about urban public transport. Thank you. To be quick, but I hope it's okay. Thank you very much.
It was absolutely great. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation and the perspective on how to integrate complexity and a complex perspective on the city and mobility system, but also including normative and teleological aspects into your model. Thank you very much. May I ask you to stop sharing your screen? I think you can also do that. Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. Are there any immediate questions, anything that must be asked immediately for the comprehensive understanding? No, I don't see any raised hands or anything popping up in the chat. All right, then thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And I would like to hand over to our second third presenter, Dr. Onia. Was it possible to solve? Oh, here it is. Fantastic. I can see the presentation. Dr. Oluwayemi Onia, are you here? You are still muted and I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm here.
Fantastic, wonderful. I would like to introduce you, or maybe you like to introduce yourself briefly, and then I would like to hand over for your presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Oniya Adebigbe Oluwayemi Oniya. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Today, I'll be presenting a topic titled the adoption of integrated transport system. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly well, thank you.
And can you see my screen, please?
Yes, I can also see your screen.
Okay, I'll be presenting a topic on the adoption of the integrated transport system. Integrated transport system for sustainable transport planning and development. To start with, please hold on, I'm trying to minimize. To start with, next slide. Transport is seen as a prerequisite having some technical issues here, please.
I've actually shared the presentation from my side and
Okay.
gave you control. So you should be able to control it from your side.
All right, okay. Transport is seen as a prerequisite for inclusive economic growth and enhancement of quality of life. To start, what is transport? So layman, transport involves movement. Transport is a movement of people, goods and services, whether freight, from a point of origin to a point of destination. So transport involves the people, it involves the environment. So there's a combination between the people and the environment. Transport helps to facilitate inclusive economic growth and development. Please, back to the first slide. It helps to ensure inclusive economic growth and development. For instance, in Nairobi, Kenya, the urban poor spend up to 30% of their household income on transport. So this has made it very difficult for the world poorest and vulnerable people to access good and quality transportation services. And when we talk of the vulnerable people, according to World Bank 2015, they include the men, the women, the aged, the children, and the physically challenged. These are the people that are classified as vulnerable people. And it has been observed that these people have difficulty in accessing good and accessible public transport system. For instance, in the city of Ethiopia, their poverty level was reduced by 6.7% because everybody in the society had access to good public transportation system, despite their numerous benefits that transport performs in the life of people and the community. There has been some negative externalities in terms of problem that has been associated with it. And one of this is traffic congestion. In recent time, there has been an increase in the traffic volume in both the developed and developing countries of the world. And this has resulted in so many problems, such as road traffic, road accidents, loss of quality time, in fact, loss of quality of life, because when people cannot move, they can't interact, they can't relate with people, they can't relate with their environments. So as a result of this, it has led to problem in the lives of those people. It has reduced their quality of life due to reduction in social interaction. It has led to problem in the society, in the environment, by the emission of some harmful substances into the air. So how do we overcome this problem? That's one of the things we want to talk about this morning. And one of the ways in which this problem can be ameliorated is the need for integrated transport system. What is integrated transport system? Integrated transport system is aimed at integrating all the modes of transport. It's a system that incorporates all the modes of transport into a single and unified system. So suffice to say that when one of the system is dysfunctional, the whole system will be faulty. When we talk of all the modes, we're talking of the road transport, the rail transport, the air transport, the active transport, that is walking and cycling. And we can see this, like the integrated transport systems, help in achieving a sustainable urban transport by limiting the use or reliance on private automobiles. For example, according to Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in 2018, so many people have relied on the use of their private cars in many developed countries and even in the developing countries. A lot of people rely on the use of private automobiles, which has resulted in the neglect of the public transport system. How do we achieve? What are the principles for the achievement of this integrated transport system? We've talked about what an integrated transport system is, that is a system that encompasses all the modes of transport into one unified system. Then how do we achieve this as stakeholders in the transport sectors, as governments, as governments and parastatal researchers? What are those guidelines that need to be put in place to achieve an integrated transport system? One of the considerations, one of the guidelines that communities, people should have in mind is that a transport system should be safe for all users. If you want the public transport system to be attractive, if you want to make it accessible, if you want to make it attractive to all people in the society, be it the rich or the poor, it has to be safe. Safety is very paramount. There should be a reduction in the number of road accidents on our roads. For instance, we've seen that a lot of accidents have been occurring recently, and it has been estimated that there will be more accidents on the road by 2030. So if our transport system are being integrated, especially the use of the public transport, there will be a reduction in the number of road accidents. Safety will be very paramount. People, the community will think of the safety, and this will attract more people to use the system. Another thing that we should also consider is the mobility choices that are accessible, equitable, affordable, and non-discriminatory. If you want the public transport system, you want to achieve an integrated transport system, the mobility choices should be affordable, it should be accessible. This implies that it should be accessible to everybody, irrespective of the status in the society. It should be equitable. It should be equitable in terms of distribution. This public transport system you have for the rich should not be different from the one you have for the poor, or you segregate the one for each locality. Then it should be affordable. It should be affordable in the sense that everybody should be able to afford it. It should not take a larger percentage of the income, like what we saw earlier in the first slide, where about 30% of household income in Kenya spend 30% of their income on transport. How much more? How much are they going to spend on other necessities if 30% is being spent on transport? How about food? How about shelter? How about housing and other basic necessities of life? Then it should be non-discriminatory. The transport system, for us to achieve an integrated transport system, it should be non-discriminatory. There should be no discrimination between people of color or the white. For example, like what we saw in the issue of Rosa Parks some years back, where she was told to leave her seat in the United States of America in public transport, to leave her seat so that a white can sit. All these things are what we should have in mind when talking of a sustainable transport system. Then we need an economic development that is inclusive and innovative. That is another point, that's another guideline or principle that we should have in that policy for stakeholders in the transport sector and government should have in mind. There is a need for economic development that is inclusive and innovative. And when we talk of being innovative, there should be expression of shared mobility. There should be a discontinuation of single occupancy vehicles. We should learn to adopt the use of shared mobility, whereby we can accommodate so much people. And through this, there'll be reduction in the number of vehicles of transport system we have on the road. Another guideline that is very, very important is that a city should bear in mind that for integrated transport system to be achieved, there is a need for the city has to be efficient, it has to be smart, and it has to be reliable. What do I mean by smart or being reliable? It has been discovered that technology helps to drive economic growth. So to achieve an integrated transport system, we need to adopt technologies that will help us to reduce some of the negative externalities that has been expressed in the environment. For instance, the picture we have here is an electric vehicle which is being used instead of relying more on vehicles that depend on the use of fossil fuels, which releases harmful substances into the environment. There is a need to adopt some of these electric vehicles. Some countries of the world have started adopting it. For instance, in Europe, according to Wikipedia 2021, Europe had more than 3.2 million plug-in passengers cars and light commercial vehicles on the road. Now, you can see that if this is adopted in almost all the cities of the world, there will be reduction in air pollution, there will be reduction in environmental degradation. And when we talk about sustainability, we are talking about how we can make the environment sustainable. When we talk about integrated transport system, how we can integrate all the modes, not just and the people in a safe and secure environment. Then another point that is very, very vital for us, the guidelines that we need to put in place to achieve an integrated transport system is a data and information that is actionable, transparent, and secured. How we need data that is actionable. For instance, if we are planning for people, we don't just sit down and plan. We need to have vital information that are necessary to the people. For instance, we need to get demographic information about the people. This will help us to plan, to know the number of people we are planning for. It will help us to allocate resources in the order that will be appropriate to each locality or each community. So when we know the number of people we are planning for, we know the number of transport infrastructure. And in this way, we are also ensuring equitable access to transport system. We know the public transport system that should be applicable to a particular location, the numbers. We know the number of people that should use a particular system, maybe bus, number of public transport buses, the rail, the active transport pedestrian walkways. To reduce some problems, like there will be no congestion, the public transport system won't be too crowded. It won't be too crowded. It will encourage people to use it, and it will make it more attractive to everybody in the society, either the rich or the poor. You know, another thing that we should also have in mind is to provide how do we implement the implementation methods. We talked about the guidelines, the principles that we need to put in place to ensure that we have an integrated transport system in the society. How do we implement this? One of these with regards to transport is in designing interchange stations to provide secure, uncongested conditions for transfer by the shortest route possible. What do I mean by this? People are always looking at the travel time. People will always seek to look at the minimum time it will take them from their home to the next station. So when we are designing interchange, we should look at the time, maybe from a particular bus station to the rail station. What is the minimum walking distance it will take people to move from a point of location to another point of location in order to use all the modes, in order to reduce over-dependence on a particular road. Then when we are even talking about this interchange, we should also design it in such a way that it will be safe and it will not impede it. There will be no conflict between the people and the environment. Then another thing another implementation method that can be adopted for us to achieve an integrated transport system is to provide adequate pedestrian adequate pedestrians to cycling walkways, such as bike parking areas at stations and bus stops. Like what we have in the picture, we have pedestrian walkway for people who are not using the motorized transport. This talks about including the non-motorized transport users and the motorized transport users, making a need for them. So when we have a pedestrian walkway that is safe, that is secure, in such a way that the pedestrians are not contesting with the use of the road, with the vehicles, there will be a limit, there will be a reduction in the number of road traffic accidents. And it will even encourage people to walk, like people have been talking about go for green environment. Like what we have in the picture, we can see trees being planted. It will help us to move closer to nature. As such, people will be willing, people will be encouraged to walk. Then another thing, when we talk of the cycling walkways, like the picture on to my right at the top, we can see a parking station for bikes. In Netherlands, for example, the government has encouraged them to make use of bicycles, at least to the next bus station before going to their home. But when we do this, there should be a place where they can safely park the bicycles afterwards without necessarily impeding on other people's rights or people's movement. Then we should also think of integrating the ticketing and information system. That's one of the ways in which we can implement the integrated transport system in such a way that we can achieve a sustainable transport planning and development. How do we integrate the ticketing system and information system? With the integrating ticketing and information system, they are as important as the physical integration of transport infrastructure. This is a system where the same physical or electronic tickets can be used to pay for multiple modes and transport services. Usually, people are often tired of being moved from one particular mode to other. But when
Dr. O'Neill, may I ask you to wrap up slowly?
Okay.
I don't know how many slides are left.
Okay. When we have a system that integrates the fares and the service information where people can have access to information concerning all the modes, it will help us integrate the transport system better. Then I have the place of active travel. I will just summarize that. What is the place? What is the benefits of active travel in ensuring sustainable transport? It helps to reduce traffic congestion. It reduces road accident. It helps in the overall improvement in the health of the people, whereby we achieve healthy living when we walk. Then what is the role of integrated transport system to achieving a sustainable transport planning and development? One of the roles, we have several, one of the roles is that it incorporates land use. It incorporates the land use and transport planning together. The different land uses are being planned for. It improves the public transport. It helps in promotion of safety and well-being of people. Then it helps in social inclusion and accessibility. Everybody in the society is included, both the rich, the poor, the physically challenged, the aged. We have them, they will all be included. It protects the environment and overall livability of the city. That's one of the benefits of integrated transport system. And finally, it supports rural development. The rural areas are being developed. Like what we have in the picture, we can see some roads that are being cut off totally from the urban centers. Then in summary, to conclude, I'll just talk about the role of integrated transport system for the sustainable growth. Helps to promote a safe, comfortable, and livability of the community. In this light, government and stakeholders in the transport sector should ensure that active transport / active and public transport system should be adopted for use by making it accessible, affordable to everybody in the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this really comprehensive presentation. Are there any immediate questions? Obviously not. Then I would still try to call for our fourth presenter. Anati, do you know if the fourth presenter is here?
He was here before, but I don't know what happened. He's not here now.
Okay.
Anati, who's the fourth presenter?
Dr. Mchuno.
Okay, let me get hold of him. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, if he's not here, let's start with the discussion. And I have seen in the chat there was one question for the first presenter asking, let me see, in terms of the access, what was your finding in terms of driver distraction owing to the cell phone or mobile phones? And if the first presenter could share a little bit more of his experience and his knowledge on the aspects of technology and driving behavior, in particular of taxi operators, passengers, and friends.
Okay, the question is from James Chakwizira.
Yes.
I think. Okay. In terms of excesses, driver excesses, what was my finding in terms of driver distraction? Well, because it was a qualitative, that aspect of my work was qualitative, and we didn't ask the drivers directly. But then I would like to support. I would like to answer that question with literature. Now, what happens when a taxi driver picks up a phone while driving or use an hands-free is that the driver tax, there is something called the driving tax, and it is affected. Now, what is the driving tax? There are variables on the roadway that change consistently that makes hazard perception so imperative when people drive. Now, you are meant to focus on the road. Now, if you pick a phone, a part of your brain process or driving process is being cut short. Now, you might be able to, how will I put it now? The focus won't be on the driving anymore. So you are distracted. You tend not to see what's happening. Now, this goes on with using even an hands-free, which even you are not holding the handsets with your hand and driving. You use hands-free, or it's even worse in the sense that in my part of the world, taxi drivers collect money by hand while driving. So they are driving. What happens is they are driving and they keep asking for the fares from the people, turning back, removing their eyes from the road, and they do all this. So yes, so basically what happened is distraction, and it affects the driving tax, basically. I'm not sure if I answered what you wanted, but yeah.
Does that answer the question? Everybody happy? All right, thank you very much for this comprehensive answer. There was another interesting question on the chat that I would like to pose to all three presenters. And actually it was asking, we had this huge impact of COVID-19, which pushed many people towards the car and using the car more intensively. And the question that was raised now is, how can we invite people back into public transport? And how can we actually achieve that people are again moving back to use public transport services? Maybe I'm posing it to all three presenters, and I already see Dr. Nia is actually opening her microphone, and then I would hand over to you immediately. Maybe you would like to respond to that question.
Yes, thank you so much. Regarding the advent of the COVID-19, we realized that it has impacted almost all aspects of the economy, and the transport system being one of it. The public transport has not been so attractive now because of the COVID-19. However, it can still be made attractive. That was why we talked about relevant information. When we know the number of people living in a particular area, we know the number of transport. We just need to increase the number of public transports in order to achieve integrated transport system. From my own perspective, in a place where we have 5 before, we can increase it to 10. In a place where we have 2 people or 3 people occupying a seat, we can make it 1. And in a place where we have like 1 person or 2, where we have 2 or 3 people, like I said, have 2 or 3 people occupying a seat, we can make it 1. We just reduce the number of people using the particular system. And not just that, there should be a reduction in the travel time, travel distance. They should make it in such a way that if you want to go from here, for example, in Johannesburg, maybe you are moving from a particular location from here to University of Johannesburg, a particular public transport system that will convey everybody at once, we can split it. It can be splitted into two, such that when you move from one, it will take you to another one, and people will alight and join the next bus. Then the use of so many preventive measures have been in place. Use of all these nose masks, washing our hands, just normal proper cleanliness. Those are some of the things. When we are in the public transport, let us adhere to rules and regulations that can prevent us from contacting the virus. So we should adhere to some of these guidelines, this principle, reduction in the number of people in the public transport system, then use the nose mask, the preventive measures that have been stated by the health officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oniem. Dr. Lucan, maybe you would also like to respond to that one from your perspective and also from the complexity perspective. What would you see? What would be an approach to get people back to public transport?
Yeah, so my answer is going to be like my presentation itself for the position. Well, it's first a question why. Why is this problem of access to the city arisen? Okay, so but that's a bigger issue. I'd say to answer more precisely, we're going to have to look at a comprehensive way of thinking about the different modalities related to time, okay, and related to capacity of the different modalities. So at the moment, if you look at the city, you have parallel modalities of transport accessing all parts of the city, all right? So, and we know there's this challenge of, so what I'm saying is, we're going to have to look at how are we going to look at a complementary mode where one modality, for example, rail, complements taxi, complements non-motorized access to the city as well. And I think when we look at non-motorized access, that's one way of controlling the spread of COVID within the city. Is there a need for all to travel within confined motorized vehicles in the city, which is the case now? And the answer is possibly not. But the problem related to that is it has an economic impact on various industries related to the modalities. So again, it comes back to a collaborative approach to how to plan for the post-COVID-19 pandemic. And it's going to be an uncomfortable decision, a process of decision making, where there has to be some kind of compromise for gain. I would really like to see a complementary system of different modalities that keep people safe. You know, at the moment, the commuters are vulnerable due to economic circumstances. They are forced to take certain kind of transport, and sometimes the loading of those particular modes of transport are not conducive to the precautions and protocols related to COVID-19. But I do hope that the thinking about COVID-19 transportation in the city itself is something much more broad and collaborative, and to look, to learn from these and move forward in a progressive way. There's no definite answer, but it may be a start. Thank you.
I think it's a good start. Thank you for this answer. Peter, I see you're raising your hand. Is this an immediate follow-up question?
Yes, it is.
Then I would hand over to you, please.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. For the presenters having presented very good papers. I just want to bring mine is an observation so that we can also think about that. The issue of COVID-19 and cost. The issue is who will bear the cost? Because if you look at COVID-19, it has imposed cost on the transport system. For example, a bus that used to take about 15 people will now take half of it. Now, how does he bear the cost? Who is going to pay him? Even the mass transit, which is public, if you take half of the people, now there is issue of the delay in time, because some people will have to wait much longer, else you have to put more buses at the same time. That is an issue which I think we need to reflect on. Money is just an input. So the issue of cost, we'll have to look for where that can be compensated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this important question. I would again open to all three presenters to reflect on the question of capacity and costs due to COVID-19. So how are we managing the capacity issue and the cost issue? Who would like to reflect?
Can I come in now?
Fantastic, please.
Okay. Thanks to Peter, I was gonna bring his concerns up, and to do that, I would like to disagree with Dr. Onia on reducing the number of people in public transport. Now, basically, I'm from Nigeria and I'm from Ibadan. Now, the urban mass transit system is being dominated by informal operators. Now, if you ask them to reduce the numbers of passengers they have, where do the costs come from? How do they resolve this issue? And they buy the same amount of fuel, they travel the same amount of distance. Now, one solution I'll think of is mass vaccination. Now, if people are vaccinated, people can return back to using their mode of transport and drop the single occupancy vehicle and move to the buses. Now another thing is the effect of this is being felt the most because the way we planned our cities, we have zoned out, we have zoned land uses and they are not complementary, which is back to what the architect spoke about, Lucan, yeah, I guess, about complementing land uses. Now, if the residences, the land use for the residences are being complemented with that of services, of offices, now you wouldn't have the need to travel that far. You could just go walk down 5 minutes and you're at your workplace. If the schools have been planned with the residences and not zoned far away, then people will not have to travel 30 minutes to get to their schools. They just have to walk. It's between a walking distance and they will get to their school. So I think we need to rethink how we plan our cities and how we merge land uses together so that we can adapt mixed land uses, which are things we don't see in this part of Africa, or let me say in Nigeria. We have everything all zoned apart and you have to travel. And let's not forget that one of the downsides to zoning is that you have to travel. If land uses that are complementary of each other are planned together, then I don't think we'll have any need to travel. So that's just my take on it.
Thank you very much. Peter, are you satisfied? He's not there. Anybody else who would like to respond to that question?
Yes, I'm satisfied. Thanks.
You're satisfied. Fantastic. Dr. Onia, a comprehensive, quick answer on that one too.
I would just like to add one or two things. We talked about the reduction in capacity of people in the public transport. For now, we are dealing with a problem that we don't know when and when we come to it. We are talking of mass vaccination. Some people will not take this vaccination. What are the things we need to put in place at the moment? If we are talking about the public transport, the government has a lot to do. For instance, in Lagos State, when during the first and the second wave of the pandemic, in Nigeria, the government made sure that they put in place public law enforcement agencies to arrest and deal with public transport officials who carry beyond the approved capacity, the number of people. So in this way, in fact, if you want to take the public transport, if you are trying to beg them, like, okay, I'm going to alight here, they are going to tell you that no, we have public officials in front that may likely arrest us. So when we put some of those things in place, it will put a fear in the heart of the public transport officials themselves, such that they don't take beyond the normal capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming back to that question too. I saw another question in the chat that I would like to pose, and it was directed to the two presenters that are considering African city with dual spatial units and consisting of the traditional city and the colonial cities or parts of cities, and how viable it is to achieve balance in the design of an urban transport system. So how to deal with these different city conceptualizations or spatial units, and how can you actually deal with that from a transportation design perspective? Anybody who would like to respond to that question?
Okay, I'll
take on the challenge.
Yeah, I read that question. So I know I spoke about traditional and colonial cities as well. But I think also what I'm going to say relates to the previous question, but the two actually do complement. It's about, what have we learned from COVID-19? How much has COVID-19 forced us to reflect? I mean, we had hard lockdown, which was a very important time in reflecting on what is the status of being and living in where we do, in the city, etc. So, one of the things we're going to have to relook at, there are three factors here. Urban revitalization, okay? That's one. The second is investment in public transport infrastructure. And the third is decentralization. So on the first one, it is, if you look at South African cities according to the apartheid model, we have townships and we have people of different socioeconomic classes starting to access the city. And so that created infrastructure based on colonial planning. If you looked at my slides previously, the old city of Durban was very different. It was kind of complementary movement system, and it had a feel of quality of place. So the question is about, is it possible? I don't think, the question is how viable is it to achieve a balance? We have to achieve a balance, because the fact is the infrastructure, there's a lot of infrastructure that is colonially imposed, but how do we think about what's the impact of that on the city? We spoke a lot about that today, investment in public transport, and this is where decentralization, I think, comes into, is a very important, significant concept. It is look at the impact of COVID-19 also in the apartheid created townships and settlements. What has happened there? And when I reflect on it personally and looking at the development and the investment in the city at the different nodes, I was going to talk about that as well, but there wasn't any time. So if you look at pre-1994, which parts of the city were affluent? I'm talking about the broader eThekwini region, right from north to south. And if you look at post-1994, the investment seems to be in the exact same places as was before, with some kind of mixes trying to happen with Conubia, etc., as an example near Gateway. So it's about time we stop kind of looking at a reactionary approach to how do we fix this problem when it arises, and step back and look at what was the spatial impact, what's the difference between a township and an urban place, what are the qualities of urban place, and how can we spread those qualities to alleviate pressure on the city. So I'm not talking about, again, having a dormitory city, where people just come to the city. We've got to fix the city problems as a live workplace itself, but also invest in, reinvesting or investing in historically disadvantaged communities. And in that investment, it's also not just about a top-down providing professional services, but it's about empowering communities through knowledge and skills development to start spatially transforming their own communities, but also keeping skill sets that have been developed within those communities. When I look at it, many communities have, young students where the entire community struggles to have the student go to university and graduate. When that student becomes a professional, that student ends up leaving that township and living in one of the former affluent areas. So these are some of the very critical questions of attitudes that have our attitudes to what constitutes, a good state of living. What about humanity? In the decisions we make about where we invest our money, but where we invest our skills, expertise, and by us being privileged and having the opportunity to have progressed, educationally, professionally, what are we doing for those communities left behind? Or are we just becoming hypocrites in this perpetuation of a problem from a very top-down intellectual kind of approach? Thank you.
Katrina, can I contribute to your section?
Yes, please, go ahead.
You see, I've listened to every of these discussions. From the planning point of view, where we look Africa, if you see the development pattern, and when you compare it with the development pattern in advanced country, European country, there seems to be different. And the reason why I'm saying that is that if you look, most of our places are full of sprawl. We build horizontally, not vertically. And because of that, the area that we occupy are so large to support when you talk about bulk infrastructure, the service the city, which transport is one of them. I seen somebody talking of Ibadan and all those things. I remember when I was there one time, I was going with one of your governor, was telling Professor, see our city. I say, I wish there's a bump to clear all this sprawl so that we can create a new city and go very vertical. So when you begin to go vertical and you reduce the journey and the length of the street and all those sort of things, then it becomes a manageable city. That is one aspect. The second aspect is that I understand what we are talking is that we are talking with the premise of the existence of what type of transport that we have within the African cities as against the European city. The public transport, every time when we talk about African city in public transport, we are talking of all these buses and all those sort of things. And I don't think it's going to be the solution for Africa. If you all think about the urbanization system that is going to take place years to come, the city is going to grow at a very high rate, a lot of population. So what we're saying is that the development pattern have to change, the land use have to change as that we go vertically. We've tried to do that in some African countries. If we go to Kigali, it has been changed. It's more vertical so that we reduce that long distance, and then the area per the number of the people or the dwelling unit per square meter is very high than what it used to be. You go to Kenya, in the city or the center of Nairobi, the same thing. Where when we were there in the 80s, late 80s, the whole place, the colonial city, the city is not only just business, no residential, no anything, and people have to drive so far away. Now, the new system of creating densification in the city has really created less problem, although they have increased the densification more than that. So that's what I'm saying. So the thing I'm talking about is that we need to shift away from all these buses to train, to tram, to all those type of things that you see in most of the European city that can take you through the city and also can collect a large number of people. And I think that's one thing, without not choosing the right concept, we will ever talking about the problem of transportation. The COVID-19, for me, I think we also try to think about what is a short-term problem that was a long-term. This is a global issue. And I think what we are doing now is to find a solution within this short period. It may not likely be what is going to be forever. So any intervention that is possible now, and I think each one of the presenter want to reduce, which is correct. But if we reduce, then you must talk about the economic that the people are losing. In many advanced countries or many other countries, there is economic support to the transporter to be able to achieve that during the COVID period. Why are we not doing that in Africa or most of the other places? It's one of the things that we have to look at. I don't believe that the COVID will be a long-term scenario, but the long-term scenario in Africa is how do we have a mass transport system like what we have in the developed world to take a lot of people to reduce all this. Then taking over transport, you have to talk about impact on the climate, the carbon footprint emission. Those are the things that we also, so by having too many of these buses, then we are not resolving the issue of climate change. And even the issue of using the electricity, we haven't got enough electricity for the domestic. So there are so many variables and things that need to be looked at that are a key problem that we need to find solution to some of them in a very robust way. I think that's what I just want to contribute in all the things that I had.
Thank you very much for this really important contribution and to show this nexus between the different subsystems of a city, showing this connection between the transport system, but also to land use and how we are using land and how we are building cities. And if we're going horizontally or we're trying to integrate also more vertical or higher density neighborhoods. Professor Kumbo, are you still here?
Oh yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. I think we have a little bit more time. Shall we go for one more question?
Sorry for disappearing.
No, it's okay. I'm just checking back if you're with me.
Professor, that's fine. All right. Maybe I'll maybe like to start by appreciating the three presenters. Wonderful presentations indeed, and the discussions are so stimulating. But maybe we still have about 10 minutes because we're supposed to end at 1:10. But since we didn't have the fourth presenter, we could end at 1 so that people can grab some lunch before we move on to the next in a way session. But I just wanted to know from Mr. Akogun to say, from the behaviors I've been talking about, are there maybe ways of dealing with that? And from maybe international experiences that you could have looked at as part of your literature, what lessons could be learned from elsewhere, as say developed countries in terms of behaviors and how they manage them? And the other issue could be, given the I would say technological maybe advancement that we have in terms of payments. You talked about as they pay, then they may turn back and receive the money in the process, violating the traffic laws and all that, getting involved in accidents and all that. I don't know, are there any issues in terms, I'm trying to push, say, as we're trying now to develop a framework, if possible, or are yet to develop it, or some kind of new model to contribute to new knowledge, are there ways of dealing with such issues, since we could be having maybe better experiences elsewhere? What could be done? It could be peculiar to Africa because we have this dominance of informal transport systems and all that, but what could be done better from anyway international experiences?
Okay, like in my recommendation, we have the 3 E's used in controlling behavior, and the first is engineering, and engineering measure being using physical measures to nudge drivers, and that when using physical measures to nudge driver behavior, we have enforcement also. Now, the issue of enforcement would bring about something else for informal transport and road safety. Now we have an issue where a policeman arrests or stops a taxi driver from after violating traffic laws, and all the taxi driver will do is fold some 100 naira or fold some 500 naira and pass it on to the police. So that really weakens the issue of enforcement in battling risky behavior in taxi drivers. Now, the issue with education again, we need to reorientate drivers. Now, what we found out in my study is that a whole lot of these drivers didn't go to driving school. Now, we all know it's about garbage in, garbage out. You practice what you learn. Now, they are being taught rubbish on the road by their fellow friends or family members, and when they start driving the same way. So the culture recycles itself. So, and that's why we recommended that taxi driving should be professional. Now, the professional body will be backed by law, created by law. And the professional body would ascertain the right skill for this taxi driver. They will test them to determine if they are fit to drive on the road. And now, if they violate any rule and they are found wanting, sanctions will be sent out to them, will be given to them, and their license might be seized. And if they are found driving again, that's the end. They might be prosecuted. So these are the things we recommended in the study. But now in developing a framework, we are not there yet. Now, I'll consider that in the coming months and try to see what I can come up with, or what myself and my supervisor can come up with as regards developing a framework in tackling behavior as it relates to the Nigerian context or the African context, because we need to understand again that the system we operate here is different from what exists in the developed countries. And also we need to know that even this transport system in Ibadan is different from that of Kigali, it's different from that of Joburg. So we need to develop something, we need to develop something that is localized, that suits our particular situation. So we should be coming up with that in the coming months.
No, thank you very much. There have been efforts as well in South Africa to try and formalize, or discussions to formalize informal transport systems. But as you are indicating, professionalizing such systems is not easy. So yeah, your response is welcome, and we need really to consider the local environment. There should be homegrown solutions, not just importing from other worlds. But there are those necessities. For example, they still need to receive money. So maybe you need to consider that. Say, so how are they going to receive their money? The payment system to reduce those maybe distractions as they look back. Then they end up in a way getting involved in accidents and all that. So consider those necessities that we need and that they cannot do away with, but try to improve, say, how best can we improve, for example, payment systems and all that, and maybe working with other modes of transport as well. I don't know, do we have any other reactions? We still have some few minutes. Any other reactions, interesting discussions we have had?
Anybody who wants to pose a follow-up question here?
Any other reactions, comments, as we prepare to wrap up this interesting discussion we've had? It appears, Katrina, we've done a wonderful job, and the presenters also did a very good job. So I don't know, do we have a way of giving an applause here? I know some systems you can click, then the hands start flying.
You can do that in the reactions. If you go to the bottom line, you can do. But I would like to invite everybody to at least briefly turn on the camera and give an applause and a wave to the presenters? That would be nice.
Can we turn on our cameras and see each other and just appreciate the three presenters and the attendees who were responding? Thanks very much for the responses. Thanks very much for the participation. It was a very lively in a way session. Thank you, three presenters. Thank you, attendees. It was really good. We really enjoyed. Thanks, Anati, as well, for hosting us. I think we've done our job, Katerina. The presenters did their job as well. So, guys, let's grab lunch and meet in the afternoon session. That was good to have you here. And don't get tired. We still have 2 more days to go. Thank you. See you around virtually.
Thank you very much. Ciao. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Can join room 2?
Either 2 or 3 because room is also still live.
Room 2 and 3 is still active, so you can join if you have the time.
Hey, more time.